She works in the area of scientific collections, including mammals and botany, where she carries out curatorial research activities. She also works in the exhibition area, developing education and communication tasks. Next is Marcus Vinicius Silva. He's an advisor to the Casa de Oswaldo Cruz, or Fiocruz, in Brazil, working on open science projects, digital collection management, and scientific information metrics. He is the coordinator of the Digital Preservation Committee of Fiocruz and of the Virtual Library History, Cultural Heritage of Science and Health. Next we have Gabriel Garcia Martinez. He's the coordinator of photographic archives process at the Centro de Fotografía de Montevideo. It's so late in the day that I'm even struggling in English. In recent years, he's specialized in color management and digital image capture and treatment processes. In 2019, he was part of the first generation graduated from the Photographic Heritage Conservation Program of the Regional Training Center of the Center of Photography of Montevideo. Felipe Bengoa is one of the promoters of the En Terreno Foundation and also the creator of Map in Chile, two projects that are focused on rescuing and disseminating the urban and natural heritage of Chile. And Laura Casareto is the director of the Historical Archive of the National University of La Plata in Argentina and director of the journal Hilos Documentales of the university's Historical Archive. And she has several master's degrees and specializations in archival and heritage issues. Welcome to all of you. So I think I'll start with a question for everyone. This conference, as you know, sits at the intersection of culture and heritage institutions like yours and the Wikimedia community. And I'm curious if you can tell us how you ended up here. What is your journey from GLAM institutions, cultural heritage, into Wikimedia? And maybe just for fun, I'm going to start with Laura at the other side of the table.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I know it's late. So why or how I'm here, or why the historical archive of the university works with Wikimedia? Well, actually it started out during the pandemic. It started out during the pandemic when we started thinking about actions with regards to the memory and justice movements in Argentina. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't march on March 24, which is the Day of Memory, and we created this online event to release archive document online on Wikimedia Commons, and we created different activities regarding access to public information and the other Wikimedia projects. So that is really the first aspect concerning archives with GLAM, but a lot of people have an archival background and people working with different Wikimedia projects here today. The idea is that we want to continue systematizing and thinking what are the different uses of archival content in Wikimedia projects, and to see how archives can also link and liaise with these projects to improve something that is very interesting to us. For example, that we don't lose the production context of a document. So that's something that we will continue working with and systematizing different aspects. So the workshops have been very useful, what we learned yesterday, today, to systematize those aspects. In Chile, photographical archives that we have been working with in 7 years is a collaborative archive. It's independent. We are not dependent on any institution, unfortunately, maybe. And we started from our sheer lack of knowledge as to how to work with archives. So it was really about we were motivated to share archives, to share memories, to share knowledge. Political exiles abroad, people that couldn't come back to the country. So that's really what motivated us. We wanted to share memories and the history of these locations. Then we were forced in a way to start learning the technical aspects, the legal aspects, how to work with different institutions. And after 5 years of working with this archive, promoting the archive, we started seeing that there are different institutions that share the values that we wanted to develop. In the first place, I have to acknowledge and recognize that our platform in a way copied the different features from Wikipedia. For example, the change suggestions among users that can participate, can edit, or can modify information. And in a way, we copied different features from different platforms to make it more engaging, more attractive, whatever archive or file we're working on. We reached out to Wikimedia Chile. We knew that we shared values, quite relevant values like open access, democratization of information, and the collaboration across users around the world through online access or access to the internet. So we started becoming more knowledgeable about the movement. This is my first actual involvement with the Wiki movement. I'm so happy that I have participated in the different workshops. They've been great. And I'm just now maybe getting more educated and informed about the work behind the Wikimedia movement and the technical support, the legal support, and the support of the different people that make it possible. Really, we are able to speak about archives, memories, or this and that, but it's really the people behind it that make it happen. I am very honored to be here and to learn from everyone in the panel. I feel like I'm just beginning and taking my first steps in the world of files and documental heritage. So I'm so happy to be able to be here and to learn from Wikimedia. Good afternoon. In our case, well, I am representing the archive of the Photographical Center in Montevideo. We are an institution under that depends on the city government. So we are a government agency. We are a public archive. So for many years now, we've been working with some project with Wikimedia Uruguay about making some sets of images open to the public. We come from other licenses, very different from the licenses that we're using today. We had a very 20th century, I like to say that way, 20th century regulation in our institution, and thanks to the notion of being a public photo archive, we depend on a public agency. We think of access, and this is where the ideas, or our ideas and Wikimedia ideas converge.
We take a major great step, which was making the historical series belong to the public domain. This is the archive of the city of Montevideo. This also meant that our exchange with Wikimedia became stronger. We started to work together, and also we participated in several Wikimedia Uruguay activities. Especially we told people about our experience, and this is one of the reasons why we're here today. Because I think that as an institution we have come a long way, because in the past we focused on access, and now we're focusing on something different. And this is what we'd like to share as well.
Buenas tardes todos e todas. It's a pleasure to be here, but I feel it's my speaking Portuguese, so I speak Portuguese.
Eu trabalho na Fundação Oswaldo Cruz.
I work at the Osvaldo Cruz Foundation. This is a public Brazilian institution that works with the Ministry of Health. It was founded in 1900 to combat the diseases that affected the Brazilian population, the yellow fever, the black plague, etc. And there were some health issues and misinformation as well at that time. The context is much smaller, was much smaller, but nowadays the foundation has 19 units. One of them is the Osvaldo Cruz unit that is in charge of the memory of the institution. We have some records recognized by UNESCO. We also have some library collections, and this material belonged to Brazilian famous people. There are also some scientific education activities, and we have an architectural collection as well. They are all included in the Brazilian cultural heritage. So there's a lot of expectations. The principles of the Osvaldo Cruz House and Foundation were already close to Wikimedia. They worked to promote and disseminate the cultural information in our collections. There was a lack of scientific dissemination, so this is quite a recent partnership in Brazil. During the pandemic, people were sensitive to this issue because things got harder to do. What the previous administration had done, people were trying to fight misinformation. Many things happened during the pandemic. So our partnership with the Wikimedia and the Brazilian movement became truly necessary. This is quite a recent partnership. It goes back. It was created this year, and it's already yielding results, and hopefully it will yield more results in the future. Thank you. I would like to tell you about the institution I represent, the National Museum of Natural History of Uruguay. It's the oldest in the country. It was created in 1837, so it's as old as my colleagues. It's an institution that aims to preserve one of the largest natural history collections in the country. These are items which are valuable because they have data associated to them, where they were found, when these are biological exhibits, plant and animal items. So we want to preserve them, do some research, and also we need education. Okay, I'll come closer to the mic. So I was talking about the collection and the museum's aims. We want to organize education dissemination activities. We want to share the collections because it makes no sense to just keep them because they are public. The museum works under the ministry, the state. So that's our mission. We want to preserve this for the future and also share the information. We were lucky, and this was absolutely random. We found out about Wikimedia Uruguay. We came into contact, and from that moment on we found some similarities because we had similar initiatives. We wanted to share information. We wanted to release items and make them accessible to everyone. Therefore, first we found out about what they did, because we had very little information about the possibilities, tools, and they came to the museum. They explained so many things to us so many times about which possibilities we had. And last year we started coming up with activities so that we could help and how we could join efforts, because at our museum, as it happens in many museums or heritage institutions, we have very limited human and financial resources. Therefore, they could help us a lot because we didn't have the time or the skills to do some things. We found that Wikimedia projects were a new opportunity to where we could provide this information that we want to make accessible to everyone, and that was truly interesting, and that's what we're doing with a colleague now. Thank you.
I feel like a common theme I'm hearing is the need for each other, right? Like, I know we in the movement really know we need cultural and heritage institutions, and I think almost every one of you spoke about coming to the Wikimedia movement in a moment of either crisis or need, so it's interesting. You all are representing various countries in the region, and I imagine there are many similarities between the challenges and opportunities you face in open access in your countries and the dozens of countries represented here. But since we're in Uruguay, I wonder if you could help us situate the question of open access here in the region. So this question is for Meika, for Felipe, and for Laura. Can you give us a sense of, in Uruguay, in Chile, in Argentina, what challenges are you facing specifically that you think might be either unique to your country or something that our audience can kind of build on and learn from? I'll start with you, Meika.
Ahí, tengo problemas con el micrófono. Bueno, en Uruguay en realidad es un poco, no es tan sencilla la legislación.
Well, our laws are not so easy to understand in Uruguay, and they're not so clear-cut. But I would like to tell you about what we have done, not just in the Natural History Museum, but in the field of science or regarding biodiversity. We have made a lot of progress, and I'd like to tell you about the current situation. The collections are meant to be shared with people. Therefore, the government created an initiative a few years ago. I think it was 2013. This initiative aims to create, to be part of the Global Biodiversity Information Facility Uruguay. They aim to digitalize the biological collections in the museum, but others as well. So we did this. It was a huge effort because we hadn't been able to do this up until that time, considering how old the museum is. So we didn't really digitalize pictures. We actually entered the metadata of the samples into the system. I think we have around 400,000 items, and that's a lot. It takes a lot of work, as you may know. And that's one of the initiatives that the museum and the Ministry of Environment participate in. And I think that's where the government comes in, but there is no legislation. There are other individual efforts. For instance, there's a PhD student, and she created a major database, and she made it available in the International GBIF division. There are other initiatives. Some botanical gardens want to create a website including the Uruguayan flora, which will hold information about different species and also records. So these are the initiatives we have nowadays. I think efforts are not enough, or let's say resources, what is invested is not enough. Unfortunately, I think more obstacles come to mind than opportunities, or maybe that's my perspective. One clear barrier: when the museum digitalized every sample, then we had a problem because we do not have a repository, and there are no repositories available. The information is now digitalized, but it is included in the databases of each author. I'm sure the Wikimedians here are crying right now when you hear this, because we made a huge effort. It was a huge achievement, and people can't use this. If you make a query to the collection, yes, that works. If a teacher wants to go over some data in order to do something for her class, then the information is not available. Also, the materials and resources. We don't have enough resources, and the ones we have are not used to that end, because the work is not complete yet. We're just beginning. The database should be improved. Institutionally, and regarding the necessary resources, there are many urgent matters that we need to attend to, as every institution does. So it's important to make progress in this regard. Hopefully I've answered the question. I wanted to tell you about what happens at our institution. So yes, there have been initiatives, many jointly with other institutions, but I feel that they are just beginning to work. I would like to say something else very briefly. This doesn't happen at the museum, but at the GBIF hub in Uruguay, we work with different researchers from the country. And many times at the School of Sciences or other institutions, some people fear releasing the data, and that means that people do not want to join these courses, let's say. Thank you.
I didn't see any tears, but I saw a lot of head nodding. Felipe, how similar is that to your experience in Chile?
It's quite similar. I think the difference, as I said before, is that this project was completely independent, so we had to take the long way. It wasn't like we talked to the institution and they said, yes, of course, you can work on our archive and publish our collection. No, it was the other way around. 6 years ago, 7 years ago, public institutions and many private institutions were really protective of their collections, or they would charge high or low rates depending on what you were requesting. So this made access to information much more complex. And many times this was public domain information or public information, and you had to pay to access the information. I remember going to the National Library. There's a protocol, and you can have a look at 3 items per shift. To see a whole collection, you might have to spend 4 days at the library. And we had to take the long way and not work with public institutions. So we contacted people from Chile who wanted to share material. I think that we did what institutions were not doing, which was communicating all this on social media, inviting people, attracting people, making things accessible and not expensive. And also this would enable people to share these images while they were at work, or maybe simply on social media. We made it easy for them. So we had to talk to photographers who were like 80 years old, who had huge collections, and we invited them. To our surprise, many of them accepted the invitation. Also, relatives, people who had photographic collections from the past, they wanted to donate the pictures, but nobody would take the collections because the bureaucratic process is quite lengthy. Also, we started getting a lot of content. Some things were positive and others negative, but there was a bottleneck. We're now digitalizing the material, but it takes a long time. Also classifying the materials. And then we also need to upload and disseminate our work. I think that our strong suit now is communication, but we need to keep working on our digitalization. At the beginning of this year, we received a collection of 23,000 images from a Turistel record. Turistel was one of the main travel agencies in the country. They worked for 25 years. They were a beloved company in Chile. It was one of the first companies that actually showcased some specific crafts and places in the country, and their collection is amazing. We've just digitalized 3,500 images, pictures, almost 20,000 to go now. and also many albums that are to be digitalized as well. And we have digitalized 55,000 images in total, and we have 85,000 to go. And we also need to upload them to the platform to share them with the community. Therefore, we need a lot of human work. And I think that's one of my concerns, which I would like to talk to you about. How can these projects join Wiki without disappearing? How can they be transferred? On terreno.com, I think it's valuable. The community finds it valuable as well. And it's not the amount of information, it's interaction with information, how people interact with photographs as a heritage or memory item. You can have a look at the map, you can check the historical photos from your neighborhood. You can find people that were related to your ancestors, and you can talk to other community members. You can learn about the history of indigenous peoples in Chile. There are many ways to interact on the website. And I think that's the huge value that this platform has nowadays. Of course, the photographs are valuable in themselves, but one of the main concerns is the amount of information, the research that we need to do for every photograph. And we are not researchers. So we need to delegate this work to a community so that they can do this work. It's very similar to Wikimedia in that sense, but we do not have the Wikimedia community. Therefore, I think that being here is very valuable, and meeting you, all of you as well, so that we can connect this work, so that we don't lose the job what we have done, and so that we can reach more people. I wanted to say as well, I think I might have focused excessively on the negative side of things, but I wanted to say as well that we want to share information, and that's our mission, and this is information created in the museum. We have just come into contact with Wikimedia, but fortunately this year we have a resident Wikimedian, Federico, he's over there. And we shared 7,000 photographs we have with them. These are field trip images that included common species but other rare species. And this is another example of how we can strengthen our work. We shared 500 images in Wikimedia Commons that we would have been unable to upload because the process is quite complicated. So we were able to share images.
In Argentina, like
So we've been talking about this outside the panel as well. I think there are several dimensions, and one is the practical side of things. To talk to me, Wikimedia, have a repository and provide access to the heritage, we need to have the suitable repositories with the necessary descriptions. There's a lot of work to be done before all this. So there are some practical restrictions that have to do with the resources, space, etc. And I think that happens in every one of our countries. Regarding our legal issues, I can tell you about archives.
I was thinking when they were speaking that the legislation on heritage in Argentina is very scattered, and it doesn't really supplement one another, but there is a lot on open access and access to public information. There is a law regarding access to public information, sensitive or personal data, and laws that state that what's being produced through public funding has to be open access, has to be accessible to everyone. So in universities, dissertations, for example, go to an open access repository, and archive documents are considered this way as well. They should be open access because those documents, you cannot access them because they might contain sensitive or personal data. Now in Uruguay, I visited different archives, and there is a system in place it is connected to the public access law in Uruguay, which is not the case in Argentina. In Argentina, we have the public access law, but there is no archive system. So there are many contradictions that are very much connected to the different country regulations, and it is good to see what we can release on Wiki. Not everything can be released on Wiki in our country, so it's good to look at the legislation available to compare what the context and the situation is in museums, archives. Really, it is different from one place to the next. Now, I think it is interesting, as you were saying, all saying, that open access or access to archives in Argentina. I mean, in Argentina we speak about archives a lot. The community does a lot of work. State archives do a lot of work for this to be considered. But it's still not a state policy. It's not a policy yet from the Argentinian government. That might be the case here, but not back home. What you were saying about repositories is very interesting. It is important for the community to see what is available and where, in which museum, in which library, in which archive. That is great for the community, and that's not the case in Argentina. We don't know what's available in each institution, but these repositories or wiki projects, I think, might make it happen, and then can contribute to that. To well, GLAMs in general for all heritage institutions.
Questions in a minute, but first I want to ask Gabriel and Marcus a question. I think Laura teed this up really nicely. Some of us had an opportunity on Wednesday to participate in a pre-GLAM day focused on Latin America. And as part of that day, a survey was sent to all the participants asking, what are the challenges, opportunities? And one of the top things that was identified was lack of institutional policies around content release. And so my question for both of you is, how can GLAM institutions like yours, or should GLAM institutions like yours, be working hand in hand with the Wikimedia movement to shift both institutional policies and also potentially legal laws as well? Marcus, what do you think?
No Brasil, a gente também não tem uma lei de...
In Brazil, we don't really have a law either, but there is a very important role to play. The global, I mean, there are some trends in Brazil and in Latin American countries. There's already a tradition for scientific publications and open access without having to pay for access to that archive or pay for access in general. So there is a lot of experience in health libraries. There are joint initiatives by the Latin American Healthcare Center and Science associated to PAHO. So we were already working from an open science perspective, and there are some institutional policies that promote open access to knowledge and scientific production or intellectual production. That policy was passed in 2014. It'll be 10 years next year, and it's now under review because it doesn't just deal with archives and heritage. We believe we need institutional policy that will allow open and free access to our archives and content. I think there is not yet institutional policies in place that are in line with the Wikipedia or Wikimedia initiatives that will provide certainty to professionals when making content available. And from an institutional standpoint, different policies were developed for scientific publications and preservation of scientific content. All of those policies are aligned with Wikimedia initiatives, and so I think that we should raise further awareness across other institutions or other units, because Osvaldo Cruz is one unit, but there are others as well. We have an important biological collection that's been with us since the beginning. There are other institutions. In a past panel we spoke about the risks, and these were used as an example. The incident in the National Museum of Brazil, that was a very important event, but there are many examples of different institutions. We are different problems in the global south. There was a fire in Fiocruz and in other places, and regardless and in spite of all of the risk management strategies, we worked with different strategies to work and to preserve with the physical archive, but we need to think of other strategies. So by making this content available to the community, by digitalizing this content is very important. And the movement, the Wikimedia Brazilian movement, it is very important to promote culture and to think about not only access but also how we can reuse and repurpose those archives. I hope that answers the question.
What's your take on this?
Bueno, varias cosas creo que ya también se estuvieron.
I think, well, several things have been mentioned by the panel members, but your question is quite broad, and I like that. I mean, it makes me a little anxious as well, but despite the differences that we might have in our region, I think that when it comes to policy and legislation that regulate property in Uruguay, we have the copyright law that is quite restrictive, and I think that is one aspect to consider in this discussion. Now, to try to organize my thoughts, I guess, and to try to answer your question, I would say on the one hand, what can we do, or how can we change from within the institutions that internal context that is different from one institution to the next, as we might all have our own different realities, and the people working there might have their own characteristics, and we also need to face challenges and so on, things that my panel members, the colleagues in the panel have discussed as well. Now, on the other hand, we have our legal framework, and in both levels, I think that partnering with Wiki or the Wiki, there are many things that we can do together with the Wiki movement. I would start by visibilizing the problems that bring access to information to a hold, access to the archives that we preserve. So what comes from outside and what comes from within, I think we should make a better effort to raise further awareness and look at the benefits and opportunities that institutions have when it comes to opening our archives. We need to promote further access of institutions. We are a small country. Uruguay is a small country. Our institutions are usually small. So the impact that these systems or groups of organizations, of movements like Wiki, I think could be very useful for us. And I think that's something that we should explore further. Now, I don't think this is always present in the different institutions. I still feel like sometimes we feel we are custodians, or we feel too protective of our collections, and we are the ones who have to decide how these are accessed, and this has a mindset that we need to change in our institutions. Then when it comes to legislation, and that might be more difficult, we have a copyright law that is very restrictive. A few years ago it became even more restrictive, and they increased the time frame for it, expanded the copyright timeline on the different works, and so it makes us archives, or it puts us, I guess, in a more difficult position. So we have less wiggle room. We have a legal framework that we need to abide by, and we have to start analyzing the problem, and we should have a legal framework that will allow us, archives, libraries, and cultural institutions that have repositories that are non-profit. We should be able to work with exceptions that will allow us to grant a certain access, but at the same time complying with a legal framework. I think that's what could help solve this discussion. It is very hard, and it might be wishful thinking, and there are many movements here in Uruguay that are working for that. But we need to start by analyzing the problem. Anna, my colleague who works with me in the photographic center, she told me the findings of a data SOC survey that I was not familiar with, and she told me some figures as like how little we know about the restrictions that limit us as archives. A survey was conducted among staff working in archives and repositories. They were asked different questions about access, and for people to answer if those requests, for example, were within the regulatory framework or not. 70% of the people said that yes, it fell under the legal framework, and these were actions that actually were not permitted by law. So what's my point? My point is that these are access practices that are part of institutions when we don't even have a legal framework that protects them. So my point is that it would be very interesting to focus on the problem as the first step to analyze the need of what I'm saying. We must have exceptions, or the law must establish certain exceptions that will allow us to provide access to the collections that we have as custodians, because of course we are only that. We are custodians of different collections that are actually collections of public property. It's the same in Uruguay and Brazil. We have a 1998 copyright law that applies to archives, libraries, and museums, but it's really about the interpretation of the law. It doesn't explicitly mention anything that says that libraries and archives and museums can do it. It is up to interpretation, really. There's always a certain fear by legal departments. They don't want to use the wrong word or to say the wrong thing. So it's really up to interpretation, right? Because there could be sanctions. There is an expectation that we could include exceptions, but we know there's lobbying involved as well by large companies, countries of the global north. Copyright laws were adapted to or were mimicking international standards. So considering a global south perspective is very important, but I don't know, being realistic, if that could happen. If we look at countries in Africa, in Latin America, or Asia, I think that that type of legislation would be very useful for us.
So there's so much richness here. I'm public service announcement. I think Meika and Gabriel, we're going to have a chance to potentially visit your institutions tomorrow. Thank you for opening those to us. We're very excited. So what questions do we have for this panel?
There's no more room.
There's
actually,
no more room.
there's no more room.
No.
That's the reason why
I
we
thought
were.
we had 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, there's no more room for the cultural activities at the. Yes,
I
so
thought you
like
meant for
we feel like the 15 slots that we had for the National History Museum and the 15 for the Photography Center of Montevideo. But however, they are public institutions, so if you want to take some time tomorrow to go and visit them, they are going to be open. No sé por qué estoy hablando en inglés, perdón.
I don't know why I'm speaking English. I'm so sorry. Okay, anyway, these are public institutions, so if tomorrow morning you want to go visit, you can. Of course, you won't be able to have that tour that we will do tomorrow with Daniela Desiriev, but you can visit the institution and you can, well, see it, and there are many other museums that you can go to, and the Natural History Museum. But yes, we do have some time for questions.
I tend to notice people moving around. Is this a question in the front? Maybe,
Alguien que podría haber estado en este panel, perfecto.
Well, she could have been part of that panel as well, right? Hello. Gabriel, based on your experience working at a public institution, you said that you released some images or documents in collaboration with Wikimedia in 2020, and I don't know if I understood that correctly, but we are undergoing a similar process. So what have been the repercussions of that release or opening, and how was that process of collaborating with this external institution? Releasing in a way is letting go, right? So if you can elaborate on that a little bit. So this historical series, or this collection, was released in 2020. Beginning of 2020, it went to public domain after following the institutional route, or the natural route that we would regularly undertake in an institution like ours. We need a decree from the governor at the time for the status change to be allowed. Now, we were able to overcome some technical aspects through support. These are some of the difficulties that make raised to make it available in our online catalog. Things that we naturally upload, the information, the context, all the standardized information, and we were able to solve access within the catalog itself, which is very useful to us because we have everything centralized. Now, we had worked, and we had analyzed what the benefits would be. And this is something that I mentioned earlier, that it is important to get in touch with other institutions to analyze what those benefits can be. Now, something we expected, and then we were able to confirm, and maybe it was actually better than we thought, is that we were able to reduce times and costs related to internal management. We had a certain access before, but access was granted after users requested access to images, and that entailed an entire internal process of searching, answering emails, and this and that. So a lot of internal activities to grant access to those images, which is not necessary anymore. The people can access our website and download the images, and we don't even know they've done it. So we're saving a lot of time that in the past we would use to manage those requests, and now we have time to devote to other tasks. So that is a big benefit that we were able to appreciate right away. It drastically reduced the number of requests that we were receiving to access show certain images. Now, another benefit, and I think this is one of the most interesting, is that we work on the documentation of the images and in adding information to provide a background and to set a location and so on. So for some pictures, for example, we needed to ask a description that we needed to get from other sources. So the team provides a lot of information as to where was it taken, when, where, why, to provide certain background information to that picture. Making that available in high resolution, the images in high resolution, and users can access a better quality picture, and so they can see more details in the pictures themselves, the pictures that we make available. Therefore, they can provide further information or even correct information that we had provided them was not correct. And at the photography center, we have learned a lot about how tree patterns have grown in the city, lightning patterns change, how clothing has changed over time, and this and that. But there are people who are experts in very, very concrete or specific topics, and they provide really thorough information that help us enhance our archive, and at the same time other people will be able to find and to use these pictures better.
Therefore, this collection is very interesting regarding the results of making the images available in high resolution. Also, something important to remember is that images in the past were disseminated, but they were not of great quality, because this dissemination cannot be stopped with some sort of regulation or barrier to access. Images were posted on social media, etc. When we made them available as high-resolution images, they disseminate, but with better quality. So, in a way, we are being fairer with the people that created the information. Because as we provide better quality images, this dissemination has better quality content. And this is one of the main guidelines that we have identified. And we have detected other things as well.
Okay, we're at time, but I'm going to ask La Jefa if we can take one more question. Yeah? Okay, great.
Buenas, gracias. No.
Thank you. A question addressed to Meika. First of all, many of the things you said regarding the Natural History Museum resonate with my experience with the La Plata Museum in Argentina. So the question is, what can you tell us about the process, the digitalization process of the collections, compared to this, the lack of will to do so? Great. Actually, in the digitalization process we had within the museum, we had no difficulties. The hardest part was collecting the data, and then we had to know how we shared the information. For instance, we have 20 data about an item. Should we share everything in the database? Should we not? Unfortunately, we didn't need that debate because the data are not public. However, the Florencia Grattarola initiative that includes biodiversity data, which is a sort of consortium that makes biodiversity data available. Within her PhD, she contacted many researchers, and some of them were very much in favor and others were not. And they stayed there. So not all the data are available. And also, and regarding the experience we had with Federico, it was great, and with Wikimedia in general, because they are this link with this world that is very difficult to understand. And we had no experience, for instance. It wasn't just the doing and how we make things available. It's also knowing what this can be useful for. This can be useful for this, this, and that. So it was a great experience. Very briefly, I'd like to say that the Argentinian law requires that research data be shared. These are publicly funded studies, so the data need to be included in a repository. The researchers have 5 years to share the information. But the data are different according to the science, and they are produced differently. So they're trying to work that out. Yesterday at Universidad Nacional de La Plata, they launched the research data repository. Well, we don't have that in Uruguay. You can conduct a study, but the data are not shared. There are some repository initiatives to hold data, research data, and some institutions are making the data available. But we need to know which are social science data. For instance, a document is a datum, so in this case this could be made available. But it's the datum produced by researchers. It's not the primary source. You access a file, for instance, you're a popular library user, you get the year, the information you got from the documents. Yes, that's okay, but you are not uploading primary sources to the data repository. That's something different. But yes, they do have some time to do that. If the studies that is the case if the studies are publicly funded. But if there is co-funding, it's different. Some studies are conducted with private data. So if you build your knowledge on these data, you need to see how you approach this. We work with the IP unit at the university, because this is quite recent and we need to see what can be released or not. There is a data repository. I can send you the law later on. It's already available on the web, but I think it's good to share this. We have one more question. Maybe.
Si alguien quiere hacer alguna pregunta más.
One more question, if it's not too much.
Voy a hacer abuso de que tengo el micrófono, que también vengo trabajando.
So I have the mic, and I would like to thank Micah and Gabriel for the work they have been doing with Wikimedians Uruguay. And this is, you're supporting us here today. We've been working with Fede, and everything you've done is so valuable. Thank you again for your great attitude regarding this difficult path. But an exciting path as well. Thank you for working with us. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for the invitation.